also, several senators have brought up about the 6% and the 99% and things like that I thought I ought to clear up, because I could say myself that when I first started finding out how much paper Judge Kavanaugh had on his record, for his background.
Yo, this shit is not fake at all. I'm gonna play that shit again.
They need to go straight to jail for that shit.
That shit wrong, yo.
And she feel like she a young girl too.
Yeah.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. Now, since there has been so much talk about respecting our troops and so many people lecturing about respecting our veterans, in Atlanta, there was an Air Force veteran, Anthony Hill, who had mental illness. He was suffering from PTSD after he got back from Afghanistan, and he was shot and killed by Dekalb County police. Even though this military veteran was unarmed and obviously suffering from a mental breakdown. So let's see how this young brother, who was a military vet, ended up getting shot by the police.
Involved shooting. First, this exclusive video shows the naked man minutes before an officer shot and killed him. Channel 2's Darren Moore is live in Dekalb County at the apartment complex where it happened. And Darren, we now know the man's name.
And Fred, late last night, Dekalb County police identified the man as 27-year-old Anthony Hill. The shooting happened in this apartment complex called The Heights at Chamblee. Now, witnesses described some strange and bizarre moments before officers arrived here, but this is cell phone video exclusive to Channel 2 Action News. We blurred out part of the video of a man walking around naked at an apartment complex here on Chamblee Tucker Road. Residents called Dekalb County Police Monday afternoon when they saw 27-year-old Anthony Hill hanging from a balcony and crawling on the ground with no clothes on. Well, here's what Dekalb's public safety director said happened when officers showed up.
Observed a nude male out in the parking lot. When the male saw the officer, he charged, running at the officer. The officer called him to stop while stepping backwards, drew his weapon, and fired 2 shots.
Hill died on the scene. Police said he did not have a weapon, and the officer who fired the fatal shots is a 7-year veteran of the force. And because of the circumstances surrounding the shooting, well, Dekalb police said they will step aside, and they brought in the GBI to handle this investigation.
A 27-year-old African-American male was shot dead by Dekalb County police. This happened Monday afternoon in Chamblee, which is a suburb just outside of Atlanta. Dekalb County police received a phone call from a resident at the Heights apartment complex, which stated there was a man behaving deranged, running around naked and crawling on the ground. The caller even said that they saw the naked man randomly knocking on doors, telling people he was okay. Witnesses said the naked man was climbing porches and just behaving strangely. Now, the man, now identified as Anthony Hill, a resident at the Heights, was met by a police officer who's a 7-year veteran of the force. That's according to Dekalb County Director of Public Safety and Police Chief Cedric Alexander. Chief Alexander, who is at present not naming the officer involved, says that the officer shouted at Hill to go inside or get arrested. Now, that's according to witness statements. Now, this is where witness accounts begin to diverge. Some witnesses say that Hill didn't appear to be mentally competent and comprehend the commands coming from the officer, so he began to approach the officer with open arms. Now, other witnesses described the approach as an aggressive lunge or even a charge, at which time the officer opened fire. He shot twice, both times hitting Hill in the chest. Anthony Hill died at the scene. Now, one thing that eyewitnesses agreed on was that they believed that Hill appeared to be unarmed. Now, it's been confirmed by Chief Alexander that the responding officer was also equipped with non-lethal weapons, including a taser and pepper spray. This is part of what Chief Alexander wants to understand is why the officer chose to draw his firearm rather than pursue other methods. Now, Chief Alexander also said that his officers do undergo some special training in dealing with mentally ill people, but he said apparently more is needed. Now, Hill's death is the third shooting death of an apparently unarmed black man by a white police officer since Friday, just on the heels of 19-year-old Tony Robinson in Madison, Wisconsin. And on the same day, on Friday, in Aurora, Colorado, Nayshellis Vincent, a parolee who cut off his ankle monitor, they were both shot and killed by police. Now, this fatal shooting investigation is being handed over to an independent group in an effort to maintain transparency and fairness. This will now be handled by the Georgia Bureau of Investigations.
So this brother Anthony Hill, who was a military veteran suffering from PTSD, and was having a mental breakdown, and he was obviously unarmed, was running around his neighborhood naked, and people called for help. So Officer Robert Olsen ended up responding to the call. Now, according to this cop, he was sitting in his car waiting for backup, and he probably was terrified, but if you're that scared, you need to turn in your gun and badge. Then he claimed his brother Anthony Hill started to approach him, and that's when he got out of his car. Now, one story says the cop told him to go back in his house or he will get shot. But in another story, this cop, Robert Olsen, said he told him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. Now, some witnesses say he approached him with his arms open and in a non-threatening way. But other witnesses say he lunged towards the cop. Now, keep in mind, when they say witnesses, they can use other cops as witnesses. But the cop, Robert Olsen, says when he charged him, he told him to stop and he refused to comply. And these cops love to say how people don't comply with their orders. And if they had just been good Negroes and did what masters say, then none of this would have happened. But since this brother Anthony Hill didn't comply, he had no other choice but to shoot and kill him. Now, this cop had pepper spray, he had a taser, but he chose to use his gun. Even though you can clearly see he was unarmed, and you have witnesses say he wasn't a threat to the cops. One of his fellow officers, Lynn Anderson, tried to cover for him, saying this young brother who was a military vet was attacking him, not realizing there was actually video of what happened. And the officer, Robert Olsen, eventually acknowledged that this brother never attacked him. And there were so many contradictions in the police story. Now, eventually, they did end up charging this cop, Robert Olsen, with murder.
Well, today marks 2 years since an Air Force veteran was shot and killed by a Dekalb County police officer. 27-year-old Anthony Hill, whose family says he suffered from PTSD, was naked and unarmed when he was shot by Officer Robert Olsen during an encounter.
Olsen was indicted by a grand jury and faces felony murder along with other charges. And now we've learned the DA has appointed a new prosecution team in that case.
Fox 5's Natalie Pozo is live outside the Dekalb County Courthouse tonight, where veterans held a prayer vigil for Anthony Hill.
Sinead Russ, several veterans gathered outside of the Dekalb County Courthouse today to remember Anthony Hill. Now, according to the DA's office, Hill's case is currently at the Georgia Supreme Court after the defense filed an appeal alleging an issue with the presentation during grand jury proceedings. I spoke with Hill's family today, and they tell me while they would like to see this process move forward, they are being patient and relying heavily on their faith.
Our last conversation, he said, "Uncle P, all the world needs is love." So that's what we live by. All the world needs is love.
Pierre Baylor feels like it was just yesterday that his nephew, Air Force veteran Anthony Hill, said those words to him. 2 years later, Hill's family waits for trial, while his case is on appeal in the Georgia Supreme Court.
Hopefully the process will speed up and what we feel is right will happen. And that's all you can hope and pray for.
Baylor drove from South Carolina, where most of Hill's family lives, to attend this prayer vigil organized by Justice for Veterans.
And bless their families as they go forward. Walk with them all the way, oh God, and give them peace.
Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Amos King speaking outside the DeKalb County Courthouse.
His death would not be in vain.
Addressing the issue of mental illness among many veterans. Hill's family says he suffered from PTSD.
We say among ourselves, the VA is waiting for you to die. And that's a sad situation. That's a sad commentary for those who gave their lives. Like Anthony Hill, he would serve his country. He was not killed on foreign soil. He was killed right here in the United States.
DeKalb County District Attorney Sherry Boston appointed a new prosecution team to the case. Hill's family says they feel fortunate their case has a chance of receiving justice when so many others don't.
We hurt for all families, just to lose a loved one when you feel like it was preventable or it didn't have to happen. That's anybody, no matter what circumstance.
And according to the DA's office, there's no specific timeline as to when we can expect a ruling from the Georgia Supreme Court.
Now, even though they did charge this cop Robert Olsen, 3 years later, they still haven't gone to trial. This cop has been out living his life the whole time. And every time they set a date for the trial, and every time the trial is supposed to happen, they push it back further and further. And they obviously do it for a reason. This cop Robert Olsen asked for immunity for killing this obviously unarmed military veteran. And in a lot of cases, they actually do give the cops immunity for killing people. Even though this brother Anthony Hill posed no threat and was unarmed, and this cop had a taser, he had pepper spray, and he outweighed him by a lot, he claims that he feared for his life. This cop says he acted out of self-defense and had no choice but to shoot and kill this young brother.
Fiery testimony in the courtroom as prosecutors grill a former DeKalb County police officer charged with murdering an unarmed veteran.
Robert Olsen said today he was acting in self-defense when he killed Anthony Hill, but prosecutors argue Hill never attacked him. 11 Alive's Caitlin Ross is live outside the courtroom, and she has spoken to Hill's family as they left for the day.
Jeff, this was really intense. The prosecutor at one point asking former DeKalb officer, you weren't scared of Anthony Hill, were you? You were disgusted by him. At times, Robert Olsen tearing up, choking up on the stand, telling the judge he genuinely feared for his life when he got out of the car and shot Anthony Hill.
Did you think you were being attacked?
Yes, sir.
Did you think he was going to cause you great bodily harm?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you think that you were about to be a victim of a forcible felony?
Yes, sir.
What? I just know he didn't stick to the facts.
He lied. He lied, as he's lied from day one. This was a calculated assassination. That's what it is. In cold blood, and now he's lying.
That was Anthony Hill's family you heard from there, calling Anthony Hill's murder a cold-blooded assassination. They sat through the entire day of testimony saying it was difficult to listen to. There were a lot of videos shown of that incident. They said it was hard, but they felt like it was important that they be here. Tomorrow is the second day of the immunity hearing. After that, the judge is going to make a decision whether or not to dismiss these charges or send the case to trial.
Robert Olsen teared up at times while he was on the stand today as the defense team tries to convince a judge he shot Anthony Hill in self-defense. 11 Alive's Caitlin Ross is at the courthouse tonight. Caitlin, why are the prosecutors pushing back so hard?
Cheryl, this was a really contentious hearing. At one point, Robert Olsen saying on the stand, I was just trying to do my job. The prosecutors shooting back at him. What you did was murder. They went back and forth at times. Robert Olsen, the man accused of murder in this case, was tearing up, trying to recall what had happened. They replayed the call back to police after he shot and killed Anthony Hill. You could hear Robert Olsen breathing really heavily, sounding really distressed. He gave his testimony after both the apartment manager and a use of force expert testified. Now Robert Olsen testifying in his own immunity hearing, telling the judge what happened when he pulled up at that apartment complex and got out of the car. He says Anthony Hill charged him.
Saying the words that you said to him at the tone of voice and the volume that you said them. You don't have to use the microphone, but yeah.
Stop, stop!
He says he then shot Anthony Hill maybe 1 second later. Anthony Hill's entire family was in the courtroom today listening to that testimony, shaking their heads at times. I talked to them after the break, though, and they say they feel confident that this prosecution is going to go forward. At this point, after it wraps up, it's going to be up to the judge. He makes the call. It's called an immunity hearing because if the judge rules that he acted in self-defense, those charges will be dismissed.
Now, 3.5 years later, they still haven't gone to trial. They still haven't even set a trial date. Now, this cop, Robert Olsen, did lose his bid for immunity. And they said he was unable to show that it was reasonable for him to kill him and that he felt threatened. And this cop is still facing 2 counts of felony murder, aggravated assault, making false statements, and 2 counts of violation of oath by a public officer. But still, after 4 years, it's unclear about when the trial will actually start. And we can't just be happy that a cop gets indicted or charged with a murder. A lot of times they push the trial date back, and in most cases they end up dropping the charges, or charging them with something less, or reducing the charges. And even when the police are charged, they barely face any punishment. We can't be satisfied until the cop serves the last day of the harshest punishment he can get. And all those people who talk about disrespecting the troops and disrespecting the vets, you don't hear them say one word about this. Those same people aren't worried about the mental health of those veterans when they come back from war. They're not outraged about the treatment they get because they don't really care about the troops. It's just an excuse. I don't see their outrage, especially when it's an unarmed black military vet who was shot by police. Then it's right back to he should have complied. And it shouldn't be a surprise. We should understand by now, after hundreds of years, the environment we live in. And until we put aside our tribal differences and get on code, we're going to continue to be subject to their rules, their laws, their punishment, and whatever they say goes. We just have to comply. And even when you do comply, they still find another excuse if you end up shot. And it's always easier for us to attack each other because we don't have no power and we can't defend ourselves. But until we focus on the real root of the problem and realize we are all we got, then the same cycle will continue to happen.
Come out with your hands up, face away from us. Face away. Go to the sidewalk, face away. Hands up high in the air. Face away from us. Walk to the sidewalk. Look away from us. Walk backwards towards the sound of my voice. Backwards towards the sound of my voice. Backwards to the sound of my voice. Back to our squad. And if you want to put them on the sidewalk here, that'll be okay for me. All right. Stop. Get down on your knees. On your knees. Put your hands up. Don't move. You understand? You understand not to move? You good, Luke?
122, our caller hung up. They said they were trying to stop him.
Is everything okay? That's your grandson?
Yes. When I went up and touched him out.
All right. Okay. That's good. Here's the thing. Did you see me right there? You saw me park there? Okay. So some guy comes up to me in his car and says, actually there were 2 black guys lobbying the lady in this blue Lexus. And I said, what? Where? He's like, he's robbing him right now. And I'm like, which blue Lexus? The one at the light. So I go up, I said, stay here or follow me, and I'm going to go check it out. So hopefully he's over there 170 blue light still, and I can ask him.
I mean, we just came from his dad's house. We're unaware of him too. He's on his way to work.
Okay. Well, I had to act. Somebody's telling me.
Okay, but I'm telling you this is my grandson.
Yes, and I know.
This is my best friend. We've known him since he was a baby.
All right, and I'm certainly glad that that guy was mistaken or wanted to put me in a movie or something that it's not actually occurring. So I apologize. Oh, he's going to be moved. Absolutely.
That's her. What a silly thing.
He is just a kid. So I apologize for that guy not knowing what he was talking about.
I'm sure he saw two old white ladies in a car with a black kid and makes an assumption.
Well, he was black as well, so I don't know.
Oh, my God. Well, then it's even worse.
I don't, let me just get your name real quick.
Okay.
Look, he's all good. It's the grandson.
Officer Gabriel's going to get some information from you, okay? Okay. He says the same thing. All right. You didn't have any ID with you, did you, ma'am? Nothing at all? Okay. Well, I'm guessing what this sounds like is a really big misunderstanding, and I'm not exactly quite sure what's going on, but the officers that the reason we stopped you is somebody told them something about what was going on in that car. So I don't know what they saw that they perceived was going on, but obviously that's the reason that we have contact with you right now, okay? So what it seems like is that, like I said, there's some type of misunderstanding. I understand that's, who's the driver? My grandma's friend. Grandma's friend? And grandma's in the front seat passenger side? Okay. All right. How old are you, young man? 18. 18. And what is your first name? Akil. Spell it for me? A-K-I-L. Can you speak up? I can't hear you. A-K-I-L. A-K-I-L? Yeah. And your middle initial? K. And the last? C. What is it? C. What's your last name? Carter. Spell it for me. C-A-R-T-E-R.
I'm with 148. We got one detained here. Julie.
What is your date of birth, Akil? You got to speak up with the traffic, with the radio. I honestly, God, can't hear you. And a home address for you, Akil. I don't know off the top of my head. You what's that? I don't know off the top of my head. You don't know it? Okay. Do you stay with grandma? Sometimes. Who do you usually live with? Mom, Dad? Your father? What's his name? Donald. What is it? Donald. Same last name? No, what's his last name? Nelson. What is it? Nelson. Nelson? Yeah.
144 Canadian.
And how about a good phone number for you, Akil? All right, man. Okay, sit tight 1 second. It's good.
You got it in the book, right?
Yeah.
We're good.
Come on out, Akil.
So, I don't know if anybody told you at all about what happened. Anybody say anything? All right.
Kind of told him it was a misunderstanding based on somebody's perception of it.
I was settled in with Grandma over there. Any idea what was going on? I'm parked there. Yeah. So, I was parked there.
This girl big and pregnant. He's talking about, or what? I would have decked his ass.
Did I threaten you? I did not threaten you. I said you were a dummy and she was 15-year-old driver and get out of my face. Get out of my face.
Walking up on this lady like that. Is she walking up on you?
Exactly.
You need to back the fuck up. What? You heard what the fuck I said? I said you need to back the fuck up. That's a woman. You're mama. And you's a motherfucking man. Now what you gonna do? Go the fuck on. Go the fuck on. Go the fuck on. Put that gun away. Fuck you. Put that gun away, motherfucker. Go ahead. Go ahead. You just threatened me. Away. You just threatened me, motherfucker. Put that gun away. Fuck you.
Go to the store.
Gun
Go
away.
in the store.
You're not a man.
Go
You
in the
ain't a
store.
man. Use the gun. I ain't used shit yet. Boy, put your motherfucking hands on me. I don't give a fuck who you call.
You did this. You're the one that's aggressive to everybody.
I don't care who you call. Call the cops. Call the cops.
In my face, in this way.
Yes,
And
it
I'm
does.
gonna record all of it because I'm here for it.
That's right. That's a pregnant woman. You got our all in our face. We got this lady filming.
Just walk away.
He's got a gun, ma'am.
I've been recording every second, sir, since you got out of the car.
Do your business. Get the fuck one out of here. Hey,
You were about to hit a pregnant woman. I have it here on camera.
I don't give a fuck. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. I tell you what. I will break your motherfucking face. What? That's what I said.
Ooh.
That's
Let me get my
Put your
shit.
hands on. Go ahead. Put your hands on. Put your hands on. You got a gun. What? That's right. So what? Illegal. You jumped on a pregnant woman. A gun at somebody is legal. I ain't been pointing at nobody. You's a lying motherfucker. I got it on real. Go ahead. You motherfucker. That's right. You motherfucker. Do it again. Do it again. I'm going to kill you, you motherfucker. Come on. You don't hit people. You don't try to hit me. What the hell is wrong with you?
What? He done wrote a check that his ass could not cash.
Call the cops. Call the cops.
Child, let me go to my calling the cops. I got it.
Fuck back there. Fuck back there. Don't hit me, motherfucker. You hit him, crazy. What? Yes.
You hit him first. Look at this man's eye. You hit him first. I'm about to leave ground beef and McCart and stuff, trying to be defending this pregnant lady. I've been recording since he got out of the car. Since he got out of the car. Well, they love to call the police, but this white man about to jump on this damn pregnant girl. Hell no. She better than me because my pregnant ass would have fuck out his old ass.
Run your motherfucking mouth. That's all you want.
Sweetheart, the last thing I want to do is tase you like that. When I say stop, you stop. You know you caught. Just stop. That hurt my heart to do that to you. Then I got to listen to all these idiots out here in the parking lot tell me how I was wrong for tasing you. You broke the law, and you fled as I tried to apprehend you. Y'all took this too?
That's my friend. She put it in my book bag. Because she got a little brother.
You know what, sweetheart? This is why there aren't any grocery stores in the black community, because of all this going on.
I'm the one that actually made the first post.
Rayjon Wesley, known as Coach Boom, says he was surprised by the memo when a fellow coach sent it to him.
I said, no, I didn't see it, but we're going to make sure everybody else sees it. And that's when I went to Instagram, and then I went to shared it on Facebook too. Highly disappointed. Can't believe that somebody of that political stand would do something against children.
This is that memo sent to Kenner's Director of Parks and Recreation. The letter signed by Mayor Ben Zahn says, in part, under no circumstances will any Nike product or any product with the Nike logo be purchased for use or delivery at any City of Kenner recreation facility. So can the mayor enforce it? WDSU political analyst Dr. Silas Lee says, yes.
At the end of the day, voters are not going to judge him on it, and he recognizes where he is. It's a very conservative district.
On social media, some applauded the decision.
What is the reason for this? Because I have to have an understanding of that.
Kenner's District 1 councilman Gregory Carroll says he's 100% against the move.
We should never, ever get involved to that level to start try to make decisions on people's personal beliefs.
Carroll says he wants the mayor to rescind the order.
But first, the man in this controversial takedown by police is speaking out about his arrest, as one of the officers involved has now been taken off the streets. And we're learning tonight that another one of the Henry County officers in that video was also involved in another controversial and violent arrest. Natisha Lance live in the newsroom tonight with what Desmond Morrow, a former NFL player, is saying tonight.
Well, Vinny, by now, many people have seen this video within their social media feeds, and we now know that many people are so interested in it by the thousands of views and hundreds of comments that many people on our pages have posted. Yesterday, we had questions about what led up to this video, and now Mauro is telling his side of the story.
Mauro's release of his December arrest quickly went viral.
I'm not even fighting back.
The video showing his violent takedown by 3 Henry County officers. Many people outraged over it. In the video, you can see one officer lifts Mauro's right leg and he's thrown to the ground.
It's unbelievable, man.
And another officer, kneeling near Mauro's head, grabs him by the throat.
You stab your head. Lay down. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Today, we heard from Mauro.
I felt like I was dead.
A police report says Mauro tried to kick and headbutt officers while resisting arrest.
Said a lie is a lie. You really don't have to speak on a lie because the truth will find its way. You just have to be patient.
That truth, Mauro says, before the video, he was the victim of a hate crime.
2 Caucasian younger kids, they pulled up beside me. They were shouting racial slurs towards me, like, go back to Ohio, you effing...
He says they also threw coffee on him. Mauro says he followed the car, described in the police report as a dark sedan, to get their license plate number.
They were driving so fast. In order to keep up, I had to drive fast to get their plate.
When he finally caught up to them, he says there was a confrontation, but he never threatened them. That's where this new video we got today picks up, recorded by a witness.
I am relaxed. Trust me, I'm relaxed, sir. This is relaxed. I would have shot him in his head for like that from where I come from.
In the video, Mauro says he's explaining to the witness why he followed the guys in the car, but the witness told police Mauro threatened to shoot them. A gun was never found in Mauro's car or on him. He says the police video speaks for itself.
This video shows the truth. It really doesn't matter what Instagram's saying, what the comments are saying. All that matters is the truth.
Today, we learned the Henry County Police and the DA's office are conducting an internal investigation, and one of the officers involved is now on administrative duty. Also, charges of terroristic threats against Mauro have been dropped, according to his attorney. And on Monday, Mauro and his lawyers will hold a rally to send a message to Henry County that they will not be silent on this.
I've never at a tennis match heard 20,000 people in unison boo one player.
So I'm just looking up in the stands, like trying to find it. Like, what's going on? Like, what am I missing? And then it dawns on her that it was her.
Richard Williams walked down, and here's the crowd again. Long walk down to the courtside box. Richard actually stopped and looked at somebody, and it was a very tense situation.
The guy called me a little thing, his skin right up in front of me.
Oh, here was Richard after the heckler in our boots.
An American crowd booing an American family, and you have to say that it does smack of a little bit of racism.
You go to your home state, where you're from, a couple hours south of Compton, and you're being booed, and the person that they're cheering is this Belgian woman. She played the first few games, and she was crying.
Someone was called me nigga, and it was intense. I prayed on the sidelines, and I put myself together. I didn't pray to win, I just prayed to get through this and get off this court and just be over this already.
Serena got booed from the warm-up to the last point, to the trophy ceremony.
Well, she won the match because she's a champion. She has the heart of a tiger. Have you seen Rocky? Well, that's her.
When you talk about Serena's speech at the end, she says, you guys were pretty tough on me today. And she goes,
And I would like to thank everyone that supported me, and if you didn't, I love you guys anyway. Thank you.
She walked off the court, and she was like, I'm not going back next year.
The term will go on with or without me, but I'm not going back.
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. Do that.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So in Atlanta, a 22-year-old brother, Deravis Kane Rogers, who was unarmed, was shot in the face by Atlanta police. So let's go back and see how this young brother could end up getting shot in the face by the police.
New details in a deadly officer-involved shooting. 22-year-old Deravis Rogers was unarmed when he was shot in the head. The Atlanta officer who pulled the trigger, James Burns, was fired, and now we know why. Hello, everyone. I'm Sharon Reed.
And I'm Ben Swan. Now, police say that Officer Burns used deadly force when it was unnecessary and unreasonable. Vince Sims has been poring over the investigation documents. He joins us now live. Vince, police say that the officer's account of what happened, what he claimed took place, does not match his video.
That's exactly right. Officer James Burns responded to a foot pursuit call, and when he made it there, he said that he shot at a car that was leaving that scene. Well, the thing is that the police are saying the video doesn't match what he's saying. Officer James Burns is officially terminated from the Atlanta Police today. According to internal documents obtained by CBS 46, the reason for the emergency action is maltreatment or unnecessary force.
We could not support him after looking at the evidence and hearing the officer's statement. It's just not a shooting that the department could stand by.
June 22nd, Officer Burns responded to a foot pursuit call at Monroe Apartments. As he pulled into the area, he saw a car pulling out from the wrong side of the street. Burns says he tried to block the car's exit, jumped out yelling stop before firing the deadly shot through the passenger window, killing Deravis Rogers. In the internal affairs questioning, Burns told investigators, quote, "He's clearly made a decision to run me over, and kill me. And I'm thinking about, I got to protect myself." Burns said in another answer, "I remember thinking, wow, he's actually trying to kill me." Investigators say dash cam video tells a different story. In the written report, investigators say to Burns, directly following the shot, you can be seen on the dash cam video of another responding officer's patrol vehicle walking from behind your patrol vehicle toward the location where the vehicle you shot into had just passed. The internal affairs investigation also told Burns, you attempted to conduct an investigatory stop of the driver of this vehicle without having reasonable suspicion that the driver had engaged in or was about to engage in criminal activity.
The force that the officer used was not reasonable, nor was it necessary. And that, in essence, steps outside our policies governing the behavior in which an officer would deploy his weapon or discharge his weapon.
These findings fall in line with questions the victim's father had about what happened to his son.
It didn't feel right. And once I saw my body with the actual gunshot wound, I'm like, something is really, really wrong here. Something is really.
All right, now that the firing comes from the APD's internal investigation, the GBI is doing their own investigation. They'll turn over their findings to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, and that office will decide if any criminal charges will be filed in the killing of this victim.
So this cop, Officer James Burns, was responding to a call from an off-duty cop who was working as a security guard in an apartment complex. And a lot of off-duty cops do security work in their off time. And you have to be careful with these off-duty cops because they still have their prejudice, even though they're off-duty. And this off-duty cop said there was a suspicious person walking around the neighborhood and appeared to be breaking into cars. He didn't actually see anybody breaking into cars. He just appeared to be. So when this cop, James Burns, get there, he sees his brother, Deravis Rogers' car driving from the area. Now, keep in mind, this cop, James Burns, didn't know if this brother was the suspect or if he even committed a crime at all. He didn't even know if there was a crime committed. All they said was it was somebody who appeared to be breaking into cars, not that they were actually doing it. And his brother, Deravis Rogers, most likely didn't even have a record because that's the first thing they would have said. So this cop, James Burns, claimed that he tried to block his car in when he saw him leaving the area. But he said this young brother didn't comply, as a good Negro should. And he claimed that this brother was driving towards him like he was trying to hit him. So he claimed that he feared for his life and had no other choice but to open fire, shooting his brother in the face. Now the problem for him, another cop dash camera contradicted everything about his story. Investigators said this brother, Deravis Rogers, never tried to hit him with a car. In fact, a dash camera saw this cop coming from behind his car, completely out of the path of this brother, Deravis Rogers. and then stepping behind his brother's car after he had already passed and opened fire. Investigators even said this cop had no information describing this brother DeRavis as the suspect, or that he was a threat to the cop or anybody else. He didn't even have information that this brother was the right person who was the suspect who was supposed to be breaking into cars. This brother posed no threat and was nowhere near hitting this cop with his car. Now, eventually, they did charge this cop with aggravated assault, making false statements, and violating his oath of office. But 2 years later, after he was fired and charged, the DA Paul Howard dropped the charges.
Murder indictment against the Atlanta police officer who shot and killed a 22-year-old has now been dismissed.
The shooting was the subject of Monroe Drive, 11 Alive's digital episodic investigation, and only 2 people knew exactly what happened that night. Officer James Rolfe Burns and 22-year-old Kane Rogers. Rogers did not survive the night. Jeremy Campbell is the reporter behind the docuseries. And Jeremy, what happened to change the course of the prosecution here?
Cheryl, court records filed on Wednesday in Fulton County show a notice of noel prosequi. Now, that translates from Latin as "we shall no longer prosecute." The Fulton County DA, Paul Howard, calls that a procedural matter. He says that this case is still ongoing, but that the murder indictment is dismissed. Howard says that a recent appeals court case led to questions about how statements from police officers can be used in a grand jury. So Howard says, out of an abundance of caution, his office is choosing to re-indict the entire Burns case. Now, that case centers on June 22nd, 2016, when Officer Burns shot Kane Rogers to death on Monroe Drive. At first, police suggested that the 22-year-old was breaking into cars. Now, weeks later, police clarified that there was no evidence of any break-ins. After an internal police investigation, Burns was fired from the force and charged with murder. For the past 2 years, Burns has been out of jail on bond. We're the only TV station his wife Lindsay spoke with about what happened.
We never really got to be newlyweds. June 22nd happened, which really just shook our whole foundation. I think the only way anyone kind of can handle this tragedy is just by going day by day.
Officer Burns' defense attorney, Drew Findling, says that this case was presented in an unconstitutional fashion. Findling says, quote, "We battled it, they defended it, and the case was dismissed."
So the DA said he will no longer prosecute out of an abundance of confusion. Now, he said the case wasn't over, it's just that he was going to drop the charges for now. The cop said the case presented against him was unconstitutional, and him and his poor wife never got to live as newlyweds. And even though this brother DeRavis Rogers doesn't get to live his life, this cop has been out for 2 years on bail. But the DA did say the case wasn't over, and 2 years later, after the shooting, they decided to re-indict him.
A former Atlanta police officer charged once again with murdering a 22-year-old man. The Fulton County District Attorney announced today that a grand jury returned an indictment on 4 counts against Officer James Burns, including felony murder. So tonight, we're connecting the dots on how we got to this point again. A hot summer night, June 2016, 2 lives changed forever. Former Officer James Burns is investigating a potential car break-in suspect on Monroe Drive in Northeast Atlanta. 22-year-old Kane Rogers is leaving the area in his car. Burns believes Rogers is driving right at him, so he opens fire, shooting and killing Rogers. But Burns' story never added up to investigators. And less than a month later, on July 15th, the Fulton County District Attorney issues a warrant for Burns' arrest for the murder of Kane Rogers. Fast forward 2 years later, almost to the day, 11 Alive reports exclusively that District Attorney Paul Howard scraps the original indictment, but he announces plans to bring the case back before a grand jury. That happened on Wednesday. The grand jury re-indicts James Burns, charging him with felony murder, aggravated assault, and violating his oath as a police officer.
This was a quick decision by the grand jury. In less than 1 day of court, the jury re-indicted former APD officer James Rolfe Burns with a murder charge for the 2016 shooting on Monroe Drive.
Now, Burns' attorney tells us there was a constitutional problem with this last case. He says there are still problems with this case. He plans to file motions in the near future to keep fighting this in court. Meanwhile, Kane Rogers' mother was also in court today, but she told me she didn't want to make a comment.
So in one day, a grand jury decided to charge him with murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and violating oath of office after they decided to re-indict him. Years later, after this cop who was caught lying and had no reason to even bother this kid, let alone shoot him, they're still having trouble to even indict him, let alone going to trial or even being convicted of murder, especially when the victim is an unarmed black man. And years later, they still haven't gone to trial, and this man has been living his life walking free. And this black DA, Paul Howard, has done his fair share of caping for the cops. And that's why it's important for us when we vote not to just vote for a black face. If we don't have our own candidate there to push our agenda and to get things done for our community, then there's no point of voting. Our ancestors didn't die just to get us the right to vote, because it's meaningless if we don't have a candidate there for the best interest of our own community. We need to be focused on building our own community, to rebuilding our own economics, and most importantly, protect what we build. And if we put aside our tribal differences, we can easily rebuild our economy, but we have to be on code. Right now, we can nominate the most successful black businessmen and women to be in charge of funding and growing black businesses. And we all can contribute. And when we build our own economy, we can build our own schools. We can put officials in positions that we need officials in. But until we put aside our tribal differences and get on code, then we're going to continue to be subject to their rules, their laws, and their punishments. And there's nothing we can do about it. They can continue to shed our blood, and even if they are charged, they could still not get punished for it. At the end of the day, we are all we got. And until we do what we got to do, we're going to continue to get the same results.
It was a deadly confrontation between a Philadelphia man and a police officer. Now, for the first time in about 2 decades, authorities are charging the now former Philadelphia police officer with criminal homicide for the police-involved shooting. Eyewitness News reporter Joe Holden is outside the district attorney's office with additional details about this controversial case. Joe, good evening.
Yuki, good evening. It was June 2017, and this was all over a dispute involving a dirt bike. An officer saw a man on a dirt bike and believed that was cause to pull him over. Well, a struggle ensued, and that man on the dirt bike took off. This presentment from the grand jury outlines the rest of the allegations. It writes, David Jones, that man was no danger to anyone in his flight. His death was not necessary to secure his apprehension, an apprehension that would never have been necessary if the officer, Ryan Pownell, had not incited the confrontation. Charged with homicide, former Philadelphia police officer Ryan Pownell now has to answer for the June 2017 killing of a man named David Jones. Prosecutors say Pownell encountered Jones on a dirt bike near Whitaker and Hunting Park. He stopped him and frisked him, apparently detecting a firearm. A struggle followed and Jones fled.
As Jones ran, unarmed, Pownell fired at least 3 shots toward Jones and traffic, hitting Jones twice in the back. Jones's body was searched at the scene. No gun was recovered on his person.
Prosecutors acknowledged Jones threw his gun away during the confrontation. The Fraternal Order of Police, surrounded by members of Pownell's family and his lawyer, issued a blistering response.
Today's meritless indictment clearly illustrates a district attorney who has an anti-law enforcement agenda.
He encountered someone who was armed with an unlawful pistol, pulled that pistol from his waist. A struggle ensued. Officer Pownell was justified in his actions that night.
Those who long protested Pownell's deadly actions that June night gathered outside the DA's office, condemning the department for allowing Pownell to continue working on the force despite allegations of a litany of complaints.
That the city of Philadelphia failed David Jones. This killing was preventable.
Now, Pownell was arraigned at 4 o'clock this afternoon by a Philadelphia judge. His family, the lawyer representing Pownell, are hoping to have this count reduced at the preliminary hearing phase.
For the
first time we're hearing from JSO after a joint investigation by the Florida Times Union and ProPublica. Their investigation, titled Walking While Black, found that JSO wrongfully ticketed pedestrians for not carrying a driver's license.
So as a result of that reporting, JSO investigated the claims and found them to be true. Our Honey Rodriguez joins us live from JSO headquarters to explain what this means moving forward. Honey.
That's right, Anthony. JSO is in the process of voiding those 6 citations. They're telling their officers not to give pedestrians a ticket for when they don't show their driver's license. Now, I caught up with Devante Shipman, whose video with a JSO officer went viral back in June for receiving a similar citation. Take a listen.
Now people can be a little more comfortable walking down the street and not feel like, oh, I'm going to get stopped and get ticketed if I don't have my ID.
You might remember this video of 21-year-old Devante Shipman and a JSO officer who gave Shipman a ticket for breaking a Florida statute, not carrying or presenting a license, according to JSO. The Florida law says you only have to hand it over to identify yourself if you're driving when the officer asks for it, not simply walking across the street. Shipman's ticket was eventually dropped. Today, JSO says they're dismissing 6 other tickets issued for the same reason. In a statement from JSO, it says officers will receive remedial training, and a bulletin was issued to the entire department explaining the Florida statute, which only applies to motorists.
Stop taking people's way of making a living away, their license, their driving license. So no, this is not enough.
Community activist Wells Todd says more needs to be done, and he and other civil rights activists say JSO is racial profiling, and they're calling for a stop of all pedestrian-related citations.
Despite all of our sincere efforts to reach out to the sheriff to discuss this walking while black controversial problem with him, he is still hiding out in the police memorial building.
Sheriff Mike Williams previously commented, saying there hasn't been any targeting of African Americans or poor communities when it comes to writing the pedestrian violation tickets.
I'm just exposing JSO and what they do, you know what I mean? And the lack of what they do know if they're supposed to be an officer.
It is a scenario that's hard to believe. An Auburn man tries to cash a check at his own bank and winds up in jail.
And the King 5 investigators have learned the check in question was issued by the very bank that claimed it was a forgery. Linda Byron exposes a series of bank errors that left a new homeowner reeling.
I was really excited. For the first time, I actually got to buy a lawnmower and mow my lawn and everything.
Buying his own home was a big accomplishment for construction worker Ikena Njoku. He's only 28 years old. Njoku qualified for the first-time home buyer rebate on his tax return.
It was really important. I mean, I had a vehicle that I was looking on paying off.
It wasn't just any vehicle.
I had a 2001 Infiniti i30. Silver. It was just like my favorite car.
Njoku signed up to have the rebate deposited directly into his Chase bank account. But when the IRS rebate arrived, there was a problem. Chase had closed his account because of overdrawn checks in the past. The bank deducted $600 to cover what he owed them and mailed him a cashier's check for the difference, $8,463.21. When Njoku came here to cash the check at the Chase branch near his home, he was in for a nasty surprise. The check had his name and address right on it and was issued by J.P. Morgan Chase. But the customer banker who handles large checks at the Auburn branch was immediately suspicious.
I was embarrassed. I mean, she asked me what I did for a living, and asked me where I got the check from. Looked at me up and down like, oh, you just bought a house in Auburn, really? It's like she didn't believe that.
The banker says the check looked fake, so she took it, along with Njoku's driver's license and credit card, and called bank support. Njoku says after about 15 minutes, he got impatient and told Chase he was leaving to do an important errand.
By the time I got back, the branch was closed.
Njoku says he called customer service and was advised to go back the next day to get his money. But when he arrived, it wasn't his money that was waiting for him.
Hey, they just threw me in jail. They called the police and said, This guy has a fraudulent check.
Auburn police arrested Njoku for forgery, a felony crime.
I was just like, whoa, you're making a mistake, you know? You're making a big mistake. You know, don't take me to jail, you know? I got work tomorrow. You know, I can't afford to miss work.
Njoku was taken to jail on Thursday, June 24th. The next day, Chase realized its mistake. So they called and left Auburn police a voice message. But no one heard it. Njoku stayed in jail for the entire weekend. Finally, on Monday, he was released.
We weren't involved until that next morning.
Police Commander Dave Colglazer says Chase could have done a lot more to let them know they'd locked up an innocent man.
You guys are fucking dick eaters. That's what you fucking are. You're gonna record that on tape? You're fucking cock suckers. I'll take my $70 and I'll swallow that you guys are fucking cock suckers. Okay? I did not do shit. I stood there and laughed and the rest of the audience like I should. Okay? I did not disrupt anybody. That guy out there, which I didn't see these two guys till the end of the show, was mad because I said his necklace looked like some anal fucking beads, which they do.
Yeah, I just want you to take her. I just want you to take her.
Or what?
Okay.
Or what, motherfucker? Lick my asshole. How about that? Fucking piece of shit. That's why nobody likes fucking police, because they all
That's okay, ma'am. I don't worry about that.
idiots in this fucking town. I didn't spit on you, motherfucker. It's an illusion.
Oh, she tried to spit on me. She just couldn't pull it off.
Smell my shoe, bitch. Fucking piece of shit, scum. Are you gonna tease me? What are you teasing me for?
I'm not teasing you.
I'm not doing shit. Oh, you arrested me for what?
Spit on him.
No, I didn't.
You just tried to spit on him.
Video, any videotape.
You just tried to spit on him. Thanks, Will.
I just tried. Can I put my shoe on?
No, you can't.
I just tried. Wait, I just tried to spit on somebody? I just tried to spit on somebody? So you're gonna arrest me for that? Because I just tried?
Stop.
For what? What's that called? What's that called? What's that called? What's that called? Assault? What's it called? Assault? Show me videotape. You can't. That's why everybody hates you guys. Because you can't prove it. You fucking piece of shit. Yes, I have ID on me. I'm not a fucking piece of shit like you. That just gets a badge because I earned it. Fucking idiot.
As a black man, I'm used to having eyes on me, and I've never felt like this in my entire life. Within a few days of posting the shirt story, if you would, I've received hate mail, death threats. People will say, oh, he's the N-word, or he's this, or he's that, go hang yourself. People don't actually understand things unless you somehow try to turn a mirror on them or ask them to walk in other people's shoes. My first reaction to the shirt was actually a guy who thought it was a Redskins shirt, I imagine, because his first thing he said to me was, "Go Skins." So, like any New Yorker, I simply said, "Nah." And he responded by calling me an asshole and kept walking. An older white woman actually stopped me and asked me why I was wearing this shirt. And I said to her, "What's the problem with the shirt?" She said, "It's disrespectful. Why are you wearing such a disrespectful shirt?" So I responded and said, "If it was the actual team shirt or some other apparel from the team, would you be mad?" She said, "No, because that's the logo and that's the brand, so I wouldn't be mad." There's a group of white guys across the street looking at me, no big deal, as they're walking across. One of them points at me, and then after that, they start posturing as if they're gonna come over to me. And one of the guys actually stopped the rest of the other two guys and I guess told them it's not that serious and to keep on walking. It was quite a surprise that seemingly people were ready to come have some type of actual altercation with me over my shirt. Caucasians is not a derogatory term. The image of a white man is not disparaging. There's no negative thing about the shirt. As opposed to the Redskins, that's an actual racial slur. The image of a Native American with red skin is actually disparaging. But if you're a white person in America or globally, you've never felt this before. So even if it's not a one-for-one, there's still a level of you don't have a right to do it, as if people of color, people from certain marginalized communities don't have the agency or space to make you feel the exact same way. How dare they have the audacity?
So we need to address the elephant in the room. Your t-shirt is dominating the social media conversation right now amongst our viewers. What motivated you to wear it?
It was clean. Like, I think number one, the fact that it was clean was a good start. The other part is I really like the shirt. I think it's funny. It's just like the Cleveland Indian shirt, like exactly the same as the Cleveland Indian shirt with just one small change.
Yeah.
That's it.
I like the money sign there.
I think the money sign is very helpful because people still buy this stuff. Like the reason they won't get rid of Chief Wahoo, which is completely indefensible, is because they can still sell stuff with it. They can say they're going to de-emphasize it, but then they're just going to set money on fire. So yeah, I just thought it was the exact same thing, and I could see the value in the design. So I was like, hey, we might as well give this a run.
I think more thought went into it. I think you were trying to make some kind of statement.
I mean, the statement is obvious. Like, this is the same thing. Like, what we have here, this is the same thing that goes on with the logo for the Cleveland Indians, right? So, like, to have a problem with the logo of this would be to have a problem with the Indians. But if you're quiet about the Indians and now you got something to say about my shirt, I think it's time for introspection.
For history. This Midwestern housewife, like a lot of white Americans, does not think the Negroes should present history's bill to her.
We hear so much about the slavery. 300 years ago, our grandfathers were slaves, or 200 years ago, our grandfathers were slaves. Well, for God's sakes, did we have anything to do with that? I had no part in it. I had no slaves. My folks didn't. My grandparents didn't. Are they blaming us for what happened 3 years ago? Let's forget the past. Think of the future. Build up the future. And why keep hemming and hawing over the same thing over and over and over again? And they say, you must give me land because my grandfather was a slave. Well, then I would say, for God's sakes, find the man who had your grandfather as a slave and then demand the land from him. Don't bother me because I had no part of it.
Across the country, we asked whites whether the main reason Negroes had not made more progress was because of racial discrimination or because Negroes have not worked hard enough. This lawyer expressed a view we heard most often.
We find there is a reluctance upon the part of too many Negroes, particularly among the young, to take the hard and remunerative jobs that must be necessary to earn a living. There is a feeling that for some reason somebody owes them a living.
Just about half of whites in our survey said the Negro has not made more progress because he has not worked hard enough. Only 15% blames discrimination. Some had no opinion. And this woman mentioned another charge against Negroes, that they have low morals.
Their sex problem, let's face it now, how many white people have 10 illegitimate children? Very few. Very few. This seems to be a trend with them. And I often wondered what happens to these here men who follow these children. Are they busy making babies elsewhere, or are they busy in a civil rights march yelling for their civil rights?
And 4 out of 10 whites in our survey agreed that Negroes, more than whites, have low moral standards.
And they are not responsible citizens. Until they live like we are, we don't want them.
I don't want to live with me, to tell you the truth. Whether they take care of it or not, I don't want to live with them. Because they ran away from them. And if I wanted to live with them, I wouldn't be paying high taxes like I am. I would have stayed where I was.
In general, are Negroes as civilized as whites? 43% of whites said no, Negroes are not as civilized.
It's his image that he's building. They act like savages, like animals. They kill each other, they rape and they rob. When there's a riot, well, they wouldn't burn their own places. They had signs all over. Soul Brother. It made no difference. They robbed, raped, plundered, looted their own people.
Lower intelligence. About 1 white in 7 agrees that Negroes have lower intelligence at birth than whites.
We're not all created equal. And as far as intelligence, there is a little book called Breeding Down, and it says in there where the colored is born with an IQ, not born, but it develops, to 80 plus, and the white is 90 and up.
About half of whites polled said they do not think most fellow whites want the Negro to have equality.
They don't desire an education of our type. They have different music. They have a different way of dressing. They have different schools or different churches. Their religion is different. Everything is different.
Sympathetic to the Negro, 38% of whites said they do not think other whites are sympathetic to the problems of the Negro.
I don't want to help them. I don't want to help them. And I don't want them living next door to me for the simple reason that there might be a lot of nice ones, but I got 4 kids, and I don't want them growing up with colored next door to them. Because it's a proven fact. They grow up, they think nothing of each other, they play together, pretty soon they're in their teens, they start dating, and pretty soon they're marrying. I don't want my kids marrying a colored person.
Talaya, why you crying? You ready for kindergarten? Huh? You gonna wear your hair like this on kindergarten? Huh? Talaya, turn around, show the camera your hair. Talaya, you like your hair?
Yes, you ain't gonna hear me.
It's ugly? Why? Who you look like?
Ugly.
Huh?
Trump.
You look like a Trump?
Move.
It's a war. We must be prepared for Donald Trump and all of them. We're not scared of them. We remain unshaken. Actually, we are more determined after the Donald Trump tweet to expropriate our land without compensation. There is no white genocide here. It's an absolute rubbish to say there is white genocide. There is black genocide in the USA. They are killing black people in the USA. There is black genocide here in South Africa. Black people are being killed all the time. A farmer has been sentenced to life now recently for having killed a farm worker. Imagine if it was a black person sent life for having killed a white person. It will be news all over. But this black person was killed and a white farmer sent to prison for long.
All right, and we back on the forecast. And I want to say RIP to the brother Anthony Hill, to the brother DeRavis Kane Rogers. And we as a community have to stop being satisfied with the scraps that they throw us. When they shed our blood, we are satisfied with them just charging the cops. They don't have to punish the cops. They don't have to go to jail. We're satisfied with them just being charged. And we still act surprised and confused when it's clear how they really feel about us. They use the military as an excuse, but when it's an unarmed black man who was in the military, who was a veteran, you don't hear a word from them because they don't really care about the vets. They don't care about the black veterans who were treated worse than the German soldiers in World War II. And now we're dealing with the children of those German Nazi soldiers that came here after World War II, that got more benefits than the black veterans who came back from World War II. But we're still scared to put our own best interests first because these racists say we're the ones dividing America, as if we've ever been included in America. At some point, we're going to have to get on code, or we're going to continue to get the same treatment for another couple hundred years. And we're going to have to stop being scared and actually protect ourselves and protect the things that we build. If we were as violent as they make us out to be, we would never be in this situation in the first place. But we still let these white supremacist talking points get under our skin. But at some point, we have to realize we have no choice but to get on code. So as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.